2 years at least, and they worked flawlessly with my Stream Deck. Now all of a sudden, I can't control one of them from the
Yeah.
Stream Deck, which is
Yes. So,
very
sometimes I
frustrating.
need to like a reboot will help with that. I've had that issue before. I had that issue where they'll pop up with their firmware updates
Mhm.
and
That
they'll
could be
just
it.
get like stuck there. And
Yeah.
I think like a reboot like usually helps.
Do you sync your Stream Deck settings like on a GitHub repo or anything?
Not really.
I don't, although I should. That would
Yeah.
be really good to do. The one
Because
thing
I have all my settings on my other computer and I haven't migrated it to this
yeah.
computer. Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do is save a lot of those profile config files in one of the shared directories on my MacBook. So like
Mhm.
if you put it under your documents directory and you use iCloud Drive or whatever it is,
Mhm.
it'll be synced across
Yeah.
them. So in theory, if I had another MacBook, it would be okay.
On all your MacBooks.
I carry a lot with me now, like 3 or 4 everywhere I go. I'm going back to New York next week.
What?
Yeah.
Are you going to do anything fun?
Just being in New York is fun. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Like your old stomping grounds?
We're not going back. We probably won't go to Williamsburg specifically, which is where in Brooklyn where we lived. But I mean, it's all stomping grounds. I'm excited.
Are you going for a conference or vacation?
Vacation for me. So Jess will be with me at that conference in Austin. So we're really looking forward to that. We'll be there Saturday night.
You should have led with that.
That she'll be. Oh, I didn't tell you she was going to be there.
I think you did, and I forgot. But we were just saying, "Oh, there's going to be all these great people."
Yeah, and then I didn't say her.
Jess.
I just assumed she was a given. Anyway, so we'll be there, and then she's planning an event for work that will be in New York City in May at a space that Okta owns or rents. And anyway, so she wants to go see the space, and I was like, please figure out a way to go see the space so I can go with you to New York City. And so we're just going to go straight from Austin. So we'll leave Wednesday night, go to New York, be there Tuesday or Thursday, Friday, and then come back Saturday. So it'll be short, but I just
okay. So I'm running the stream next week.
Oh, I didn't. Yes, you will. Thank you for that.
Did you see I put some vacation days in too, where you?
I saw something. Yeah, okay, I saw something about you got another Disney cruise coming up. They Disney cruise like every other month, I think.
They had a deal over Christmas where if you pay for 2 people, they give you 2 people free.
What?
So you're inviting me and Jess?
That's funny. So we were.
You're not going to waste it on your kids, are you?
My kids wouldn't let us live that down, but we tried to get my parents to go. That way we could push a kid off to them, and then all the kids could go for free. But they said
we're not.
No, so
we're not part of your scam.
You did have to pay for 1 child.
I hear children are expensive.
They are. They are.
By the way, a little teaser. I will have a fun announcement to share in my keynote at that conference.
What?
Amy already knows.
I was trying to play it up. What?
So that'll be my suspense of the day.
Oh, you're not going to even save it for our podcast. You're going to do it in your keynote.
Yeah. It'll actually be the first public thing about this thing.
The thing?
There's my suspense of the day.
You're getting a real job.
Not going to look too deep into it.
It is a real job. It is a real job.
Oh, huh.
Okay. Are you ready to kick it off? Oh, did we talk about picks and plugs? Eli, I didn't send you. I know. I've been scouring my desk.
Are these like fun picks or?
Yeah, you can pick anything. Like usually we pick something we bought, but it can be a website. It can be an ARC browser. Which
you know we could do, Amy.
What?
Oh, have you? Have you enjoyed it?
I can't get used to it.
Okay, I want somebody to like kind of do a stream with me and teach me all the things that they use and enjoy about it, and see if I could get caught up.
I was like, I could save this for the podcast, or I can share it now.
Save it. Or what I was going to say is we could ask the audience for picks
Hmm.
and see if we could get a pick from them.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Either way.
Okay. So say what I'm going to say.
What do you mean? What do you want me to do the intro? Are we ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
Okay.
just jump
Wait,
in.
is that what you were saying, or are you saying something else?
I was saying something else.
Say what? Tell me what?
This is so it's gonna be like the worst. I'll say what I was gonna say. That's a song, isn't it? Say that's a John Mayer song. Yeah.
Oh, it's something like that. Yeah.
So what I was gonna say was the thing that's the most fascinating to me about the Arc browser. So Eli, we had Ben Holmes on the other week, and he picked the Arc browser. This is how we got off on this. And
is this the new one that's like invite only right now?
yeah,
yeah. I think I got the invite the other day, but I haven't checked it out yet.
Well, if anybody wants an invite, I have 2 more invites this week that I'm happy to share. So I'll open that up to the audience too. Anybody just, not awkward, as Ryan Hawkins said. So if you want an invite, DM me. I'm happy to share. But what I appreciate is that a browser has been around for like 20, 30 years, and there haven't been very many advancements with the browser. And so for somebody to come along and say, I have some opinions and I think we can change things around is very interesting to me. So I haven't, Juiced was saying I couldn't get into Arc. I haven't gotten used to it yet. Things are like, it's weird to me. You don't have a URL bar. And so to me, that's in some ways a little disorienting that it's completely full screen, but it's a very interesting experiment. So I just need to spend some time. I could easily see myself using that when I'm just browsing and then using Chrome for development.
Is it based off Chromium? Do you know?
I don't know. That's good. It is. There you go.
Yep.
It did port over all of my
extension or like plugins and stuff. Yeah, that was like my number one question in moving over. All right, y'all ready?
Yeah.
Sweet. Hold on, let me pull up my notes. There we go. All right, ready? Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design with a little bit of zest. In this episode, we are going to talk about component testing with Cypress.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compressed.
Welcome. What's up, everyone? My name is James Quick, and I am a full-time technical content creator.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton, and I am the Director of Design at Zeal.
And we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Daily.dev, who has been a sponsor of the podcast for a while, and it's one of Amy and I's favorite extension. We actually were just talking about the Arc browser, and one of the first questions with that new browser is, do the extensions and plugins carry over from Google Chrome? And the answer was yes. Because if not, we would miss out on Daily Dev. So this is an extension that you can add into your browser. Every time you open up a new tab, it will show you a curated list of tech content based on your interests. And you can choose tags and different things that you're interested in. You can upvote them, but mainly go and actually consume that content. It's really, really cool. It's one of my favorite ways to stay up to date with content in the tech industry, specifically in the JavaScript space. So anyway, go and check it out at daily.dev. And thank you, daily.dev, for sponsoring. And now we can welcome on our guest, Eli from Cypress, who's going to talk us through something that, again, I don't like. We've been through this before. I don't know a whole lot about in terms of testing, hands-on experience. And I know Cypress has a ton of really cool things to bring to the table for testing. But Eli, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your background?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, James. So hi, everybody. I am Eli Lucas. I am the head of developer ecosystem over at Cypress. And if you're not familiar with Cypress, we are the test automation company for you to be able to make sure that when you ship your code, that it's all working nice and properly and all that fun stuff. And yeah, extremely excited to be here and talk about all the new stuff that we have going on at Cypress.
One of the things I forgot to mention and appreciate is Eli has been like a a viewer and I assume a listener too, probably, but at least a viewer. Like I've seen your name constantly in the live streams when we do them. So first of all, thank you to you for being a consumer of the content, and thanks for joining us on the episode today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the things I really like doing, especially like working remote and being in COVID and all this, and just being disconnected from like coworkers and stuff. I've really appreciated just being able to hop in like live streams and the Compressed FM podcast, and James, the stuff that you've been doing on Twitch over the past few years and whatnot, just like helps like still like keep me feeling connected to other people in the community and that kind of stuff. So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. That has become a much bigger focus for me as well. Like I got into streaming because of during COVID, never thought I'd be particularly interested. And now, not that I consume a lot of streams, but I definitely enjoy when I do for people that I enjoy just having a touch point with and the other people that are there in the audience. So it's a fun world I think we live in. But I'm kind of curious. Say what?
And that's how we met.
Yes. I always forget. So this was a time where I did what we do now is we just reach out to people and say, hey, do you want to come talk on the podcast? And I still don't remember what exactly it was that you posted, but I reached out to Amy and was like, hey, do you want to come be a guest? And then Amy was like, we should do a podcast. I was like, yeah. And then we did a podcast. So here we are.
My favorite part of the story is you said no, but
I didn't say, I said probably no is where that started.
Oh, fun. So one of the reasons I'm so excited about this particular episode is somebody tweeted the other day, and I don't remember who it is. I should go back and look, but they tweeted and said, so what are people using for testing these days? And there were so many people in the comments that said Cypress. And it wasn't just Cypress, it was also Cypress component testing and Cypress. So I've always thought of Cypress as end-to-end testing. And so it's really interesting, all this stuff right now that you guys are also doing with component testing. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So traditionally, when people hear Cypress, they think of end-to-end testing because that's where we came and like really helped improve what was going on in the end-to-end testing space. Testing is definitely nothing new. We got a bunch of different types of testing, but at least I know for like me personally, like when it came to like doing testing, like I wanted to avoid end-to-end testing because it's crazy hard to do, and it was brittle and difficult to get set up and all this other kind of stuff. And then probably about 4 years ago, I decided to give Cypress a try for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is such a breath of fresh air, like how easy it is to not only write the tests, but to run the test and to get it up and running in your CI environments and all that kind of stuff. And so like we really kind of came and hit that area really hard and kind of became the leaders of the end-to-end testing space. And then over the past couple of years, we're like, okay, well, how else can we help improve the lives of testers? And one of the things that we knew we did very well was being able to test actual web pages inside of a browser. And it's like, what if we like expanded on concept a little bit and did component testing as well? So component testing also isn't anything really all that new. We've been doing component testing using, I think, testing library made it like really popular to do. And then some of the frameworks have their own specific like ways to test their components. Like Angular has their test harness and all that kind of fun stuff. But we're like, what if we took it and made it so that you could use the same skill set that you had with writing end-to-end tests with Cypress and be able to put that into writing component tests as well. And the advantages that you get there, like I just mentioned, like you get to use the same Cypress API that you already know and that you're familiar with. And you get to run your component tests in an actual browser using our same tool set that you do for the end-to-end tests. And so with some of the other tooling, like they run in a virtualized DOM environment, not an actual browser. And because of that, you don't actually get to see what your component looks like or get to play around with it and whatnot. But when you're running component tests inside of Cypress, you do get to visually see the component, and you get to make sure that the interactions that are happening with the component are the same type of interactions that a real user would be using with it. And that's, one of the big things with with a component and design is to make sure that the component actually looks and functions properly, that your styles are being applied properly. And that's something that you don't get if you don't have that visual aspect of it.
So cool.
Do you want, maybe we can do like a little one step back and maybe cover the high level of what end-to-end testing is, and then kind of contrast that again with component testing? Because I think probably a lot of people don't have experience with either or both. So maybe just like high level end-to-end testing versus also maybe throw in like unit testing as a general comparison.
Yeah, let's take a look at like the entire testing like landscape. And you're familiar with the testing pyramid that I think Rob Martin. yeah, the inverted one. But so if you think of the testing pyramid, it's kind of split into several different parts. And at the bottom, you have unit testing, and the biggest part. And so that's kind of saying that, hey, a good chunk of your testing should be unit tests. And then up another layer, you have like integration testing. And so that is making sure that different portions of your system are able to communicate and work effectively with each other. And then at the very top, you have end-to-end tests. Now, the thing with end-to-end tests is that they usually provide the most value as far as ensuring that your system is working the way that you expect it to when you release it. But they also historically have been the hardest to write, the slowest to run, and aren't as reliable just because there's so many different systems that need to be in place for an end-to-end test to run properly. Because with an end-to-end test, what you're saying is you're going to go and interact with the browser just like a real user would, and the browser is going to interact with an actual backend system. And so that needs to be up and running properly, and those backend systems need to be up and running with the other backend systems that they talk to. And so there's just definitely a lot of moving pieces going on there, and to get it all right and working properly is a lot of work. And so with component testing, you have the opportunity to take some of the things that you might have been doing in end-to-end tests and move it down another layer, because component tests share a lot of the same attributes that unit tests do. They're usually easier to write. They're easier to mock data and put data into them so that you can set up certain scenarios that you want to do. They're fast and they're reliable. And so they share those same characteristics with unit tests, but then at the same time, you're able to test different portions of your UI and your widgets that you would normally only be able to do in an end-to-end test. And so with Cypress component testing, you might be able to take some of those things that you were doing in your end-to-end tests and actually move those over to component tests, and then lessen the load that you have on your end-to-end testing portion.
For component testing, does this have to be framework specific? Like, are you tapping into aspects of the framework, React, Angular, Vue, etc., or is this something that's kind of agnostic of framework? Like, or is there a specific package that you have to install, like for React, Vue, etc.?
Yeah. So when we're talking about component testing, we're specifically talking about how over the past 5, 6, 7 years or so, how a lot of the front end frameworks have moved to a component type architecture. And we're piggybacking on that. So yes, specifically when we're saying component testing, we're talking about testing a component from a specific library. And so right now we have support for React, Vue, Angular, and Svelte. And when you go to use it, you don't need to install anything additional into your project. Cypress will actually take care of everything for you. You go into your project, you say npm install Cypress, you launch the Cypress application, and it will guide you through a wizard on getting everything set up. And it's all pretty automatic. Like, it's pretty rare that you have to actually go into your project and install anything additional to get up and running. Cypress will just kind of take care of everything for you, and it will drop you off in a place where it will leave you a test to mount a component, and you just kind of have to stick your component in there to get up and running with it.
And you can, so obviously with components, there's dependencies on props. And I assume that's where, in this case, mocking of data would come in. So you would mock props for a component so that you can test it in isolation and not need other dependencies going on. You have the ability to mock all the props for that component.
Yep. And so depending on the framework, most of them have this idea or concept of props. And since you're actually writing a component test inside a code, and if you're using like something like React, you use the command that's called sci.mount. And in the mount command, you pass in the component that you're going to be mounting. And there you just write some JSX and you say like, hey, I want to mount my button. I want it to have an on-click handler of this method. And I want it to have the children of this text. So the text appears in the button properly. And then once it's mounted, it actually renders that in an actual browser. And then from there, you use the normal Cypress APIs to get at that button, to click it, to validate that the text that you wanted to be in that button is in that button, all that fun stuff.
So do you still have a need for unit tests?
Yeah, unit test is still an important part because Cypress component test is only testing components. And so you can definitely get a lot of test coverage over that, but you'll probably still want to use unit testing to test your functions, test your logic, those kinds of things. While Cypress doesn't necessarily come out and say like, "Hey, do unit testing with us." If you're doing your tests for code that is meant to run inside of a browser, you can definitely use Cypress to test it as well. And we pretty much expose like the Mocha library and Chai and Sign-On for you to be able to go in and use those specs and spies and whatnot that you would to do it. So you can use all that within Cypress as well.
Now, I know one of the really neat features about the end-to-end testing libraries that you provide is that you can like almost record your tests. So you go to a website and it'll track the behaviors that you do, and you can then kind of fill in your tests or add to or modify or whatever. Do you have the similar behavior for component testing?
Not currently. So what you're referring to is Cypress Studio, and that was an experimental feature. And what that would allow you to do is like basically launch a recorder, and you can go in and then click on everything, navigate your site, right click and say like, hey, assert that this says this text and all that kind of stuff. And then it would save that as a test. And last year we launched Cypress 10, which was like a complete rewrite of the UI of Cypress. And it did not include Cypress Studio.
Okay.
And people freaked out. Probably a little bit more than what we were expecting them to. And we're like, oh, yeah, okay. So later last year, we actually got Cypress Studio back into
awesome.
The new UI so you can use it. But right now, it's a end-to-end only feature. And we're looking at expanding it to component testing as well. But Cypress Studio is great, especially if you're new to Cypress, to just be able to go in and like do things and then look at the code that it's writing for you to be like, oh, okay, that's how you get an element. This is how you do an assertion. This is how you interact with elements and all that all that fun stuff.
When I think about testing, and especially doing it well for people that haven't done it before, and particularly for companies that haven't done it before that are looking to get into it, it seems daunting to me. And I can learn anything, but especially getting down to like best practices and stuff, because I feel like you can write a lot of bad tests, and we could probably talk about like tests don't mean anything if they're not good tests. Good tests have value, etc. I'm just kind of curious, like what was your background before going into Cypress? Because you mentioned like you'd use Cypress, thought it was cool, and then I don't know how the conversation came to like come work at Cypress. But did you do a lot of testing? Was that part of your typical developer workflow at the previous company that you were at, or like what was your experience there?
Yeah, so I've been doing web application development for over 20 years now, and I've gone all the way from what's a test, and I've definitely worked on plenty of applications that have been successful that haven't had a single test in them, to working at companies that like, yeah, in order to get your PR merged in properly, you have to make sure that you have proper test coverage. So I've definitely done the whole gamut, and it's kind of daunting because testing at a company is part of its culture and part of its mindset. And you really have to be bought into it in order for it to be successful. And I think it's Obviously, working at Cypress and being a test advocate for several years of my career now, like I think it's super important, especially for enterprises and um, places where the application that you're working on is a part of its livelihood. You want to make sure that when you make changes to your application, that you're not inadvertently breaking something that could, put your business under. And so Cypress is one of the tools that you use to get into that. But if you're coming into it and people aren't bought into the idea of testing, it's definitely a battle. And that's one of the things that I look for. And if I'm talking to a company, like going to hire there, it's like, hey, this is like one of the things I do is like, do you guys test and whatnot? And if they're like, no, like, be like, okay, well, you're either like a super new startup and haven't gotten there yet, or or you will be testing soon because you'll be forced to. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things. But to get into like being able to do testing properly, I think that's one of the things that Cypress like really helps with. It kind of drops you into that pit of success with just how easy it is to get up and running with it. And we offer a lot of documentation and guidance on how to do things the right way. And so if you go over to our docs, we just have tons of information about best practices, from like how do you go about just writing and organizing your tests, to what's the best way to do things like writing selectors to make sure that you're not writing brittle tests that might change based on like if somebody changes like a class name or an ID or something like that, to how to get up and integrated with some popular third-party systems like Okta and Auth0 and other authentication providers and things like that. So that's something that we definitely try to help people with. And then we also have a good customer success organization that's a part of our commercial side of the business to help companies implement their testing strategies properly.
You mentioned,
and I think,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's probably a good segue too, is to talk about Cypress. Like Cypress, the application itself is free and it's open source, and you can go ahead and use it to your extent. That's kind of a common misconception that we run into, is people think that you have to pay for Cypress. And no, you can use Cypress to do all your testing needs and never give us a dime. We have over 4 million downloads off of NPM a week. And, if each one of those people were giving us a dime, like we would be doing pretty good. But no, we actually have a commercial side of the business as well. That is a cloud analytics service to give you insights to your tests, to show you like what tests are like appearing to be like flaky, which ones like fail too much, to optimize your test runs so they're not taking up so much time. And then along with that, we have the customer support and stuff that goes along with that if you're needing help to build out your testing strategy and whatnot.
The GitHub integration on that is fantastic. When you're talking about like your CI/CD pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So just for anybody that's listening, the neat stuff is you can make a commit to GitHub, and then it will automatically run your tests, and you get an interface directly within GitHub that will tell you whether your tests are passing or failing, and then the features that you were mentioning too about tests are flaky and things like that. And then you can click over to Cypress, and you guys have a whole dashboard with all that information.
Yep, absolutely.
I've definitely thought of Cypress as one of the leaders in the testing space. Like, again, I don't know very much about testing ecosystem as a whole, but Cypress is definitely one of those names that I know and have known for a while. To your point about like, I don't think you get to that point without some of the things that you mentioned, which is good documentation, a free tier for people to be able to do a bunch of stuff with, etc. So I'm glad that you called those out. And then there's a couple of comments and questions in the chat, so I'll let you kind of clarify this. So one question is Cypress similar to Jest or Mocha? And I think Jest and Mocha are both focused on unit testing, whereas Cypress, now you said you could do some unit testing, but it's end-to-end testing and then component testing. Is that right?
So Jest and Mocha, to clarify a little bit, Jest is kind of a combination of multiple tools into one library. And so Jest is is a testing library that you can use to write assertions, and a mocking library that you can use to pass data into it. But it's also a test runner that you can use to run the tests.
Okay.
Mocha is more just the assertion library by itself. And so people often like think of them in the same spot, but just does. You have to add more libraries to Mocha to get it to where Jest does out of the box.
Gotcha. Okay.
And with Cypress, what we did was kind of what Jest did, is that we kind of integrated a bunch of other libraries to make Cypress. And so Cypress uses Mocha and uses like Scion to do its mocking. And then we have our own test runner to actually run the tests. But yeah, when you think about Jest and Mocha, they're typically for unit testing, though with Jest, you can definitely do the component testing through like testing library and whatnot. And so like using React testing library combined with Jest is a very popular option.
Cool.
And you can correct me. I was trying to explain to you had mentioned a test runner and then you have your assertions. So the difference there is like when you're just describing a test or saying it does this, that's part of your test runner that will then check all of your code. The assertions piece allows you to select particular items, say within your JavaScript application, and then say this should happen. Like I'm expecting this to happen. So a lot of people will reach for the JavaScript testing library that have specific tools and pieces to work with your JavaScript framework of choice.
Yep, absolutely. You got it.
Sweet. And then another question. We actually had Debbie on a couple of months ago to talk about Playwright from Microsoft. How do Cypress and Playwright compare in the testing space?
So we're definitely occupying the same portions of the testing space, especially in the end-to-end side of things.
Okay.
And so Playwright has been one of those libraries to come around and actually do some really great things in the testing area, and has made Cypress as a whole like start pushing ourselves again. It was kind of the same deal when Cypress came out. Pretty much the de facto standard was like Selenium, and Cypress like really pushed on Selenium to get better and whatnot. And Playwright's kind of doing the same thing now. And so a lot of the same things that people are saying about Playwright now is what people were saying about Cypress when Cypress first came out. Like, wow, it's like fast and it's easy to use and blah, blah, blah. And so Playwright comes around and, you know, kind of like rethinks the model a little bit of like how testing kind of works. So the things that Playwright is currently doing are awesome. It's a great library as well. And we're like looking, and they're like pushing us. I think having competition in a space is good for pretty much any product, because without it, you're just going to get stagnant and whatnot. So with that, some of the things that Playwright was doing really well that we had to play catch up on was like having like Safari support. Because for a while, like we only did Chrome, and then we moved to like Chrome and Firefox, and in any Chromium browser, so you could like use Edge or Electron or anything like that. And so like recently, it's still an experimental feature, but we started supporting doing WebKit based testing. And the way that we actually did that is we utilized some of the stuff that Playwright did to get WebKit working inside of Playwright. And that's, I think, kind of one of the awesome things about open source is that, you know, we're helping everybody else out when we do open source software. Because there was one of the things that kept us from doing WebKit support was that there was just a lot that had to be done. Like you almost have to make a custom WebKit browser to be able to use it. And Playwright did that. And so right now we're actually using Playwright's WebKit browser. Oh, did we lose Amy?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. So there's that. And then we're also looking at making like improvements into our test speed and reliability when like running in CI/CD and whatnot. But some of the things that I think Cypress does that's an advantage of still using Cypress is, for one, we got our massive community and plugin ecosystem that has just takes the time to build up. And so Cypress is very pluggable. And so if you need something, we got a thing on our docs that lists all of our plugins and extensions and whatnot. You can probably find what you need there. And the way that we integrate with the your actual application when you're running. And so Cypress actually, what it does is it loads up a test runner, and it loads your app inside of an iframe inside of the test runner. And because of that, we actually have access to all the code inside your application. And that's what makes the Cypress API like really reliable when you're trying to find elements and making sure that they're there and interacting with them and whatnot, versus communicating with the browser through some type of protocol or channel, which is what most of the other frameworks do. But because of that, we're like embedded into it. And so if you like really wanted to, you could go in and like start mocking data like actually inside of your application that could be used for a test, because we're inside of your application, we're using it.
Love it. I think I'm really glad you kind of approached that conversation of comparison to talk about the ability for new options in a space to push forward existing options, because it is really easy to like have thought about something in this way or a way for a long time and not considered like other approaches or whatever it is. So I love that perspective, and I actually just recorded a video on 5 trends that I think are going to have the biggest impact on in 2023 in the JavaScript ecosystem. And one of the points was we're going to continue to see not only like more meta frameworks, but also just like growth of existing ones.
Mhm.
If you look across the board, like they all, like one will make a change that all the other ones basically agree is beneficial, and you'll see them kind of like continue to add those features and functionalities across the board and continue to get better across the board. So I love that approach to that conversation of saying there's lots of things on that side to look at as a beneficial thing, but I also love the call out for just how long that Cypress has been around and the reputation I think that it's built in developer communities that leads to that deep ecosystem of plugins and integrations, et cetera, that it's just hard to come by. Like every new product has to go through that like building up process of having people buy into the ecosystem to the point of creating plugins and creating content and extra tutorials and all those things that come around or come along with being around for several years.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Do you, so your title is specifically head of developer ecosystem. Do
Mhm.
you want to like kind of touch on what falls under the category of developer ecosystem? And I'm also curious, I assume most of your experience has been more on the engineering side, so I'm kind of curious also like maybe what the transition has been into a position titled head of, more of a leadership position, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I think ecosystem is kind of a term that Cypress coined internally and that we share externally, and it's a little bit confusing sometimes to people. We used to call our department developer experience,
Okay.
and for any lack of a better way to describe it, it was kind of like the developer relations portion of Cypress. So we did a lot of working on the docs, working on the sample applications, videos, speaking at events, all that kind of fun stuff. We recently went through a reorg where we kind of moved a lot of the people who were in developer experience into more specialized teams on what they were currently working on. And so developer experience also include like people working on tooling to go, not necessarily the Cypress app itself, but auxiliary tooling to help with the developer experience of it. So things like our plugins that we officially support, other tools like we have like a Angular conversion tool to convert your protractor tests into Cypress tests and those kinds of things. And so the people on that team like went and formed like a developer tooling team. I was on the ecosystem team, and our kind of primary focus was the documentation, the tutorials, acting as like the voice of the developer to the engineering teams. And so when they're developing features and whatnot, we can like look at their APIs, take them back to our developer community, be like, hey, do these like make sense? And is this like what you're looking for? Kind of like playing a product role and bringing that feedback into it. And then also with the education. So like I said, the docs, the guides, we have a site that is focused on testing in general, testing concepts in general, but using Cypress, and that's learn.cypress.com that you can go to and kind of like get more of a course-based approach to learning Cypress, and that is all free and up for anybody to take advantage of. And so that's my team's responsibility to maintain that as well. But yeah, I do have a pretty deep engineering background. I've been doing software development for 20-ish years. And one of the things that I always did, even as just like an engineer on a team, was I was always deeply passionate about community and sharing and speaking and whatnot. And so here in the Denver area, I've always been really involved with the local developer community. And I've ran meetups, spoke at meetups, I've ran conferences out here and whatnot. And just kind of over the past few years, I've been doing more and more like actual like kind of dev rally type things. It's what I'm finding I'm enjoying at this portion.
I feel like it makes me excited for not that I think people need to do this, but I'm glad that the idea of DevRel, the idea of content creation, the idea of speaking at conferences is just becoming more well known. Like more people are thinking of that as an option of something they may be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this on the podcast before. When I graduated college, there was no DevRel jobs except for the one that I just happened to randomly come across because I got turned down for 2 other opportunities at Microsoft. And they were like, okay, what about this other thing that we think would be a good fit? So that wasn't something that people were really talking about. But now I see people constantly in high school, like creating content and growing, building a brand and growing a following, etc., speaking at conferences. And I think it's just a good addition to the tech ecosystem for people to be able to bring in these complementary skill sets and kind of show that developers are more than just writing code. And then it potentially opens up career opportunities for yourself too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're kind of. I'm not too sure if other industries are like doing software development, where there's so many of us that are passionate about doing this kind of thing. Like my wife works in finance, and I'm just like, are there finance meetups? Like, do you guys get together and geek out about Excel formulas and stuff like that? And she's kind of like, no.
So, yeah. Sounds amazing though.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that I just really love about tech in general was you were talking about how you and Playwright kind of shared open source pieces. And I don't know of any other industry that does that either. Everybody else is usually like, sign this NDA, everything's under lock and key. But the fact that, rising tide rises all boats, or whatever the phrase is, because we mentioned having Debbie O'Brien, she basically had the same mentality talking about Cypress, because we asked her about Cypress and she said they're pushing us to be better. So I love that everybody is pushing each other to be better.
Yeah. Could you imagine if we open source medicine? Like what that would do?
Well, and just like, I wonder what it'd do to the cost of it,
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, that would be interesting.
I feel like that's like my mind is kind of blown right now to think about open sourcing of medicine.
Well, and thinking about the FDA and like what all happens there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You definitely need some good tests to make sure that if you modify a medicine,
way to bring it back around. Oh man.
Was there any in your current role, is that more of a leadership position? What has that transition been like for you in your career?
Yeah, so it is a leadership position at Cypress, and it is like my first time in an actual management position. I've been team lead and principal and stuff like that on engineering teams for quite a while. But to actually move into like being more of a people manager as well has been a little bit of transition. Fortunately, the team is small and it's a pretty good team of people who are pretty much self-starters and goers. So I haven't ran into too many growing pains yet. But yeah, it's something I'm definitely looking at doing more of.
I picked this book a few weeks ago, but I've been like digging through it. And
so
Sarah's good.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's so good. So this is engineering management for the rest of us. And she just makes some really good points and things that you don't always think about when you're writing code. The people aspect of writing code.
Mm-hmm.
I should definitely read that one. I was actually mentioning this earlier inside of our Discord conversation. I read a ton. I've like never read a career book, and I feel like I should. It's just mentally I have a block for it because I just like reading like fun books, for lack of a better word, like entertainment type books.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much value in that that sort of content.
Well, and some of it depends on if you do consume that content, how you consume it. I was talking to somebody last night and they were saying I stopped reading and just consuming podcasts because it seems more relevant, which I thought was really interesting. But, I would say even if somebody's not interested in managing people, there's some great stuff in here just in working with people in general. Like there's, I read this the other night. Let's see if I can hold it up to the screen. No, it's not going to focus. It's a dinosaur cartoon, but the point of the cartoon was like, I'm sad. And the person was saying, do you, like the other dinosaur was saying, or do you still like me because I'm sad? He's like, yeah, like, why wouldn't I? But that is how we talk to people a lot of times. Like we see sad people and we want to cheer them up instead of just continuing to meet them where they are. And that's, I think a leadership lesson. It's a person lesson that there are people behind the code that they're writing and we should empathize with them instead of trying to turn them into something that they're not or manipulate their feelings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had an audiobook addiction for forever. I used to have like really long commutes, like an hour plus.
Oh yeah.
And
goodness.
And so I've been an Audible subscriber for probably 15, 20 years. I have hundreds of audiobooks and probably 3/4 of them are pretty much any business self-help book that has been prominent. And I think I got to the point where like I consumed so much that I definitely stopped retaining like what I was listening to. It was almost like white noise in the background. And so when I started working more like full-time remote, I definitely stopped listening to it. But lately I've been trying to get back into it, but trying to be more intentional about listening and consuming the information and trying to like remember it. So I'm like taking notes now and all these kinds of things. But yeah, my wife will come home with some book and I'll be like, oh yeah, like I read that. I don't remember what it's about, but
but I went through it.
Well, this will tell you how much of a nerd I am. I read a book called How to Take Smart Notes, which
that's what I need.
Totally nerdish, but I think it came under the recommendation of Ali Abdaal on one of his YouTube videos. But one of the points that it makes, I'll save you the trouble unless you're a nerd like me and want to read it. But it was saying to like tie the notes that you're taking in books to specific projects or specific ideas that you have. And that way they get resurfaced when you need them. And that's one way that you can retain that information is by applying it to your current circumstances and situations.
Yeah. Hey, have you dived into any of these like newer, like second brain note-taking type apps to do it? Yeah, I feel like that's the next step I need to take. I've been looking at Obsidian and Notion and all these other kinds of things. And
yeah, I run my life out of Notion, which is probably my favorite application ever, just because I have everything in it. And then Tiago Forte is behind the whole second brain stuff and how he even organizes his folders and things on his computer. Total nerd about all that stuff and use his approach to that. As well.
Yeah, I've heard of his book. I need to check that one out.
Yeah. So it makes me sound like an Uber geek, which I am. But the whole structure that he has is you have a projects folder, an areas folder, a resources folder, and an archive folder. And you use the same structure across all of your devices. And then it makes it really easy when you switch devices because everything has the same structure. So it's not as complicated as it might sound initially, but it's made a difference just in how I move between, say, Google Drive or Dropbox or my computer.
Cool. Well, this testing podcast has now become the note-taking podcast.
And the productivity and Amy's a nerd.
I feel like we can all find common nerdiality in conversation. Is that a word? Probably not.
Either that or we kind of hinted at picks and plugs before we even got into picks and plugs.
Yeah, I think I've got one for myself now. One kind of like vague question. Is there anything that you're particularly excited about? Could be like coming in the future, or excited for an idea to grow. So it could be testing related. It could be Cypress. Could be that related, or it could just be like trends in the industry of web development. But anything in general at a high level that you're excited about?
I don't know if I want to say I'm excited as so much as like maybe nervously anxious about what's going on with AI in our industry. playing around with
That's a great
ChatGPT.
topic to bring up.
Okay, so I'll actually tie this back into Cypress. So I was playing around ChatGPT a couple weeks ago, and I took this React component and I purposely made it kind of complex. I like made a prop that took a method that returned back a specific type and whatnot. And I was like, hey, take this React component, and then I pasted in the code for the React component. Write me a Cypress component test for this, and it did. And I was blown away. And that's just the coding thing. I also was like, it's like, hey, like rewrite Star Wars, but make Luke Skywalker a girl named Bianca. and then it totally did it. And then I was like, but Bianca doesn't want to be a Jedi anymore. And then it like turned the story and made her like a farmer on Tatooine. And all this other stuff. And I'm just thinking, it's like, wow, like in 10, 15 years, like, are people going to be coding? And in 50 years, are people going to be consuming stories that are just built from AIs and not people and whatnot? It's kind of making me nervous about the future.
I feel like that's a great like segue into a conversation. It is really interesting. Like I don't really see jobs going away anytime soon, but you definitely think about the idea of years from now that certainly being the case. I think the cool thing for the shorter term future is it enables more innovation, right? Like if you have less time debugging or trying to figure out how to write X, Y, and Z, and something can do it for you and do it correctly, now you've got more time to innovate in other aspects, which is a good thing. There's going back to reading. So I've been a big fan of Dan Brown since high school. So like Da Vinci Code and all the other ones. And his most recent one is it's called Origin, is about basically AI and robots and that sort of stuff, and how the world has evolved up until this point, and how the world is going through a transition into like a new age of people in society. And it gets really into that kind of stuff, and it's really interesting. And also, to your point, a little bit scary.
It's fascinating. We've been talking a lot about at work the implications of ChatGPT and how we use it in our normal everyday work. And there's several developers that have been using it basically as a pair programmer, kind of like Copilot, except a little bit different. And so it's been fascinating to hear their conversations and how they use it. One of the things that we've been talking about is as developers, we use Google all the time. And you've learned different conventions when you're Googling to be able to get the results that you need, either in how you phrase your search, or like I'll wrap stuff in quotes or add pluses or minuses. And it's saying that that's all been helpful in the past. But now we're getting to the point where you're going to have to learn how to talk to a robot and how to put the right things into ChatGPT in order to get the information back that you want. And I think that that's where I struggled. I'm not opposed to learning, definitely want to push the boundaries on that. But it's like anything I ask ChatGPT, it's like, yeah, I can't do that. I don't know how to answer that question. Because I'm like asking, what's the trend? And it's like, no, wait, I don't know. I can't do that.
I've been a bit reluctant to use like any of the AI programs, specifically Copilot, just because like I'm like, oh, I don't want to forget how to code. But the other day, like I was like going to write a regular expression, and that's always a challenge. And I thought, I'm like, well, should I just do this, or should I go to ChatGPT and ask if it could do it? And it was that they were having like some peak usage time, and so it was like shut down. And I was like, oh, I guess I still have to do it. But I almost caved. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been coding with Copilot for a while, and it won't tell me everything. To me, it's more of like an advanced autocomplete, but it'll at least help me type faster. And I think that's the thing that I appreciate. It's, from what I understand, it's not quite up to where ChatGPT is, because it's obviously can't have a conversation with it. You can't ask it to refine things and stuff like that. But it is an interesting space and an interesting time.
Yep, I agree. That was so going back to the video I recorded about trends. One of them was we'll write less JavaScript this year. Part of that answer is because we'll write TypeScript, which is a little bit of a cop out. But I feel like the other part is using things like ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, because they're writing a lot of code for people. Which again, like potential benefit is that means we get to spend other energy and time and resources on other bigger problems, ideally. But I think also the biggest holdup with something like AI generated code is the validation that it's correct, and especially with regex. Like if I ask it to do a regex and I don't know regex myself, and it generates a regex for me, I don't have a great way of knowing whether or not it's correct, because I would then have to go write tests or something to bring this even fuller circle. Like I'd have to go write tests against that regex to know that it's correct, right? Because I don't know what all that gibberish is. I just hope that it's doing what I ask it to.
Yeah.
Comment in the chat about
Copilot.
asking questions to GitHub Copilot. If you
Did see
do
that. I did not know
Q
that. Thank you
colon,
for
you can
sharing.
type in a question. Yeah, I think I had kind of seen that before.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, even for us, what we do at Zeal, we're a consultancy. And so sometimes a client comes and asks for something and we're like, yeah, that's not a great idea. And so at least for right now, until we can train the open AI model to think like that, that's not something that you're going to get from a robot. It's just going to do what you tell it to do, whether it's a good idea or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and like it may do exactly what you want it to, but what you asked it to do, but what you asked it to was not clear enough to it, or like it
Yeah.
didn't include all the details that you needed to
Mhm.
communicate. So there's all sorts of like interesting aspects of it. But I feel like the tools have gotten scary is like a reasonable word to represent that, and seem to get better and better. But hopefully that enables, like I said, more and more innovation in the space of tech and other industries as well. Do we want to move into picks and plugs?
Yeah, we do.
Anybody want to go first?
Well, I can do the intro. I think we've been skipping the intro for picks and plugs. So the
okay.
next section is it's fine. The next section of the episode is picks and plugs, and it's where we pick something that we like and plug something generally that we've worked on. So, Eli, are you ready, or do you need some time?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go with something I liked, and I want to pick Wednesday on Netflix. So a show about Wednesday from Anne's family going to school.
It's like the #1 show in the world right now.
Yeah, loved it, and I watched it, and like I was into it when I watched it, but me and my wife finished it about a week ago, and it has just like stuck around in my head for some reason, thinking about it, whatnot. It is so well done, and the actress who plays Wednesday does such a great job between like portraying the character and just kind of having the I don't give a F attitude of society and everything around her and whatnot. And it kind of, I would say it has a little bit of a Harry Potterish type vibe. It's about a kid going to a school full of magic users that are kind of grouped into different classifications and whatnot, and kind of has like a murder mystery going on at the same time. So definitely a lot of fun.
That's great. I'll have to check it out. What about a plug?
Oh, less prepared for that one. I'll think about it and
okay.
We'll see
I was going to say, where can people find you? That's another good one.
There we go. So you can find me on all the socials, Eli Lucas, and that is ELY, not ELI. So ELYLUCAS. But yeah, I'm probably mostly on Twitter these days, even though that is kind of pulling back a little bit, but just like the rest of the world, it's getting a little weird, but
yeah, I'm holding out too.
I'm holding out, but I did message someone today. I was like, "Oh, have you tweeted about this?" And the person was like, "I've given up on Twitter," like altogether. And I was like, "Oh, okay, good to know."
Yeah.
Sad.
Amy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go. So I'm gonna pick something preemptively, with all the hope that it's gonna be great. So,
is it
James,
the thing that you ordered?
Yeah.
Go for
James
it.
and I were talking yesterday because we're going to that conference. Like that's what it's called.
Which one?
That conference.
Oh,
which one?
It's outside of Austin, Texas. And actually, if you live in the Austin area or within driving distance, you should come hang out with us. You can use the coupon code unspecified, and it doesn't include food, but you get a great discount on tickets. And there's going to be a lot of fun people there.
To be clear on the dates, this starts.
Oh yes, thank you.
January 15th. So by the time this podcast is out after the fact, it's probably already done. But you can follow their other events one of
Yes.
which is coming up in the summer in Wisconsin at that.us. So people can check out all the
Mhm.
information and catch that, just to make sure if people are listening to this after the fact that they know
Yeah,
that
good
this
catch.
one is gone, but there's more to come. Yeah.
It like releases in 3 weeks and they show up in
Mhm.
Texas.
Okay.
Awesome. So James and I were talking because we're going to record an episode of Compressed live there. And I wanted to bring a tiny projector. And so I went on Amazon and got a projector that's like the size of your hand that I'm going to sneak into I say sneak, I'm not, there's no sneaking, but I'm going to put it in my backpack. So I'm excited about it. I'll let you know how it goes. One of the cool things about this projector that, like I said, is the size of your hand is you can also project it on the ceiling. So I'm hoping we can have like a family movie night where we're watching a movie on the ceiling. So like I said, I'm picking this. I'll include a link to this one in particular, but I am picking it preemptively. It actually hasn't arrived. So it could be, it had great reviews. Let me just say that. And then for my plug, I'm going to plug something new that James doesn't even know about. This is going to be fun. So I'm going to pick monthly CSS and monthlyjs.com. And if you go sign up, you will get a challenge each month. So this is kind of like what we did for Advent, except it's just one challenge and one solution. You get all of that for free each month. So go check it out.
Very cool.
Oh, the site's already live for that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
So this is like trying to stay engaged with the Advent audience throughout the year.
Yeah. Super cool. Sweet. I am going to pick, I think I might have done this before, but I'm going to pick it anyway. So I've been talking about languages a lot, and I've been doing live classes with Babbel, which has been a ton of fun as I'm learning French. And we're going to Montreal for my birthday, which is French. They speak English and French, but like basically the closest place to where I live that speaks French. And it's cold, which I like doing. And for my birthday too, is going somewhere cold. But a podcast that I listen to is Coffee Break French podcast. And they have different seasons of different things. Typically, the way it's structured is they have some sort of reading that they do. So they'll read, somebody has written something about something, and it's 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs long. They'll read it. They'll then go through the dialogue and talk about it and explain the grammar, the vocabulary. Actually, this is a cool thing. Vocabulaire just ran through my head, which is the French word for that. So I'm like starting to think in French, which is cool. But anyway, it's super good because you can listen to it as fast or slow as you want to, and just get, like, as I'm walking the dog or whatever, get some extra practice, thinking about grammar and things, but also like hearing it more, I think, is a big part of it. So coffeebreaklanguages.com is the site, and then you can go to /coffeebreakfrench for that specific one. And I'm going to plug, I think I did this last time as well. I'm going to plug the Learn, Build, Teach community at learnbuildteach.com, but getting a little more specific. So on Fridays, we do wins of the week, and it's been really cool the last several weeks to see more new people show up. That's really great. And I'm thinking about adding some sort of, like, every 2 weeks or something, doing a live coding session. Probably like an idea is to solve advent of code problems live in JavaScript to kind of help use it as a teaching and learning opportunity for people who are there. So that could vary depending on audience and stuff. But one of my big goals is to drive engagement and interactiveness in the Discord this year. So learnbuildteach.com. Cool. So that is going to wrap up this episode on testing. Oh yeah. Sorry, I forgot.
Components.
I was gonna transition into like rate and review, and I just forgot. So let me do that again. This is the benefit of having editors after the fact. So that's gonna wrap up this episode on testing with Cypress. If you're listening to this in the podcast version, please leave a rating and review if you enjoyed it, to help other people find it and continue to create these fun episodes and have on amazing guests like Eli. In the meantime, that's all we got. Still live, by the way. That was just the
so
cut.
Don't share all your secrets yet.
Yeah. just so we're clear.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
It's been fun. Do you need to jump?
Yeah.
No? I mean,
No,
we're getting
not
off too,
particularly.
but
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, this is when take like a few minutes to raid people over or whatever. But yeah, I'm glad you made it on. It's especially fun to see people come on that I've been in the chat a lot. I've been kind of part of the process for a while, so we appreciate all of your support as well.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys have an amazing Friday, and
Thank you.
have fun at that conference next week.
Which one?
That one.
Yep.
This one.
Appreciate it.
Are you you're keynoting, right?
I am. Yeah, Tuesday morning.
Yeah, and Becca is keynoting one of the days too, right?
I think she's doing Wednesday morning.
Sweet. Cool.
It's a pretty good speaker lineup, if you ask me.
That is right. And
You're
she is one of our Cypress ambassadors, so tell her.
Oh,
hi.
nice.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Becca is one of my favorite people in the community. Big fan.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Talk
you.
later.
So yeah, for people on Twitch, I'm gonna raid everyone over to Clarkio. I think they're actually gone now, and then we can call it on YouTube.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.